Did you feel bad for him? No.
Undertaker's words were clear. He had no sympathy for Hogan, and in his mind there were good reasons for it because Hogan's death was not a tragedy, but rather karma catching up to him. This was not just about wrestling rivalries, it was about lies, manipulation, and broken trust that had become part of Hogan's legacy. So let me explain his reasons, starting from the beginning, when the so-called Golden Goose turned into a snake. To truly understand the depth of Undertaker's feelings toward Hulk Hogan, we need to go back to November 27th, 1991, at Survivor Series in Detroit, Michigan, because this was not just another wrestling match. It was the night that forever changed the way Undertaker saw the man who was supposed to be wrestling's greatest hero. And at that time, Undertaker was only 26 years old and barely a year into his WWF career when he faced Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship. And he was on the verge of becoming the youngest champion in the company's history, a moment that should have been the highlight of his early career. But instead, Hulk Hogan had other plans. First warning sign should have been clear because Hogan, who was known for always arriving fashionably late to events, was already at the arena when The Undertaker showed up at noon. And this was unusual behavior from a man who built his image around dramatic entrances and making others wait. But since The Undertaker was still fairly new to the business and eager to prove himself, he didn't immediately notice the signs of what was about to happen.
He says, I'm really nervous about taking your finish.
What followed was a masterclass in psychological manipulation as Hogan pulled The Undertaker aside into the shower, the usual place where serious wrestling matters were discussed, and began planting the seeds for what would later become one of the most calculated betrayals in wrestling history. He told The Undertaker that he had an old neck injury and acted nervous about taking the Tombstone Piledriver, which was Undertaker's finishing move, and being the true professional he would later be known for, The Undertaker immediately tried to reassure
that you're going to hurt your neck.
But Hogan wasn't done with his mind games, because all through the day, every time The Undertaker came across him, Hogan kept bringing up the so-called neck injury as a constant reminder.
Every point during the day, I'd pass him in the hall or whatnot, I'd get the, remember about my neck, right? So that's all I got all day. It was my neck.
This nonstop repetition was no accident. It was a deliberate tactic meant to get inside The Undertaker's head, to make him question himself, and to create a situation where Hogan could control the story no matter how the match turned out. Hogan was setting up The Undertaker for a fall that would protect his own image while risking the destruction of a young star's career. And when the time came for the match to end, the betrayal was already in motion.
We go into the finish, Flair comes down, slides the chair down, I pick him up, and when I tell you I had the brother secure, he was secure. Boom, I give him the tombstone. As soon as my knees hit, I hear, oh. You got me, brother.
My neck and my back.
The moment The Undertaker's knees hit the mat, the exact position that keeps the opponent safe during a Tombstone Piledriver, Hogan began his act by instantly clutching his neck and back and selling the injury as if The Undertaker had truly hurt him. For a 24-year-old wrestler who had been mentally worked on all day to expect this very situation, it must have felt like his worst nightmare turning into reality.
I'm like, my back. Yeah, I am much like, how, I'm like, you have all these, like, I'm, I was 24, 25 years old, and, I just crushed Hulk Hogan, right? That's what's going through my head. Like, they gave me this opportunity, they gave me the chance to run with the ball, and I just hurt the Golden Goose.
The term Golden Goose was not used lightly because in the wrestling world of the early 1990s, Hulk Hogan was truly the company's most valuable asset. The star who filled arenas, sold merchandise, and brought in the revenue that kept the WWF alive. The thought that a relatively unknown wrestler might have injured this moneymaker could have been devastating, not only for The Undertaker's career, but also for the company itself. Yet what happened backstage turned out to be even more dramatic and calculated than what took place in the ring.
He was always laying on Vince's office floor. So I go in there, he's laid out on the floor, he's carrying on, and like I'm going in to check on him, but then here come the paramedics and stuff. So here, me and kayfabe, right? So I go behind a wall with Shaq.
Picture the scene. The Undertaker had just won his first WWF championship in what should have been the proudest moment of his young career. But instead of celebrating, he was standing behind a wall with Shane McMahon, listening as paramedics checked on Hulk Hogan, who was lying on the floor of Vince McMahon's office in full dramatic fashion. Hogan made his act so believable that he even asked for his wife and kids to be called, adding another layer of tension and drama to an already intense situation.
Shane's right there telling me, he's like, Mark, he goes, his head wasn't anywhere close to touching that mat. And I'm like, no, man, I just couldn't hear it. I was like, no, man, I heard him. I don't know what, I couldn't put a thought together. I just thought I'd killed him.
Even though Shane McMahon, who had watched the match from ringside, told him that Hogan's head never touched the mat, The Undertaker was so shaken by Hogan's manipulation that he couldn't accept the truth. And this is exactly what gaslighting looks like when carried out by a master manipulator. Hogan had spent the entire day conditioning The Undertaker to doubt himself, and in that moment of crisis, the plan worked perfectly. The Undertaker then had to wait several days before finally seeing the match footage, because instant replay didn't exist in 1991 the way it does today, and during those long days, he lived with the heavy thought that he might have ended the career of wrestling's biggest star. His family had even flown in from Houston to celebrate his championship victory, but instead of joy and celebration, The Undertaker was overwhelmed with guilt and fear about what he believed he had done.
Because there's no Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, there was no Monday Night Raw yet. Right. And we had house shows. So I finally got to see, but by now a lot of the boys had come up to me and they're like shaking their head like his head never got anywhere close to the mat. And you watch it back, you can tell his head never touched.
When The Undertaker finally saw the footage, the truth was clear. The video showed that Hogan's head never came close to the chair or the mat during the Tombstone piledriver, and other wrestlers who had seen the match told him the same thing. There was no mistake, no injury, and no real reason for Hogan's complaints. But by that time, the damage to their relationship had already been done, and realizing that Hogan had lied about the injury left The Undertaker in an impossible position.
I'm still a greenhorn, right? And now I've got to confront, the face of wrestling, the biggest draw, ever. And now I've got to figure out what I'm going to do here. As a man, I got to know what the hell, but I also know that it's risking my professional career.
This was not just about hurt feelings or professional frustration. It was a career-defining moment where The Undertaker had to choose between protecting his integrity as a man or securing his future in the wrestling business. Calling out Hulk Hogan, the most powerful wrestler in the company, for lying could have ended everything he had worked for. But staying silent meant accepting that he was willing to be manipulated by someone he had trusted. The showdown finally came at the follow-up event. This Tuesday in Texas, just 6 days after Survivor Series, when The Undertaker approached Hogan with the video evidence, determined to demand the truth about what had really happened. What followed would forever change the way The Undertaker viewed not only Hulk Hogan, but the entire wrestling business itself, because Hogan's unforgivable lies were about to be exposed. That confrontation was not simply a discussion between two wrestlers, it was a defining moment of truth that would shape their relationship for the next 3 decades. And when The Undertaker presented Hogan with undeniable proof of his deception, the world would finally see the true nature of the man millions of fans had once called their hero.
Finally, I got to San Antonio and I was like, Terry, I watched it back. Your head never hit. He was like, well, brother, what it was you had me so tight that when we came down, I had nowhere to move. And that's what jammed my neck because I couldn't move at all.
Hogan's response was not just disappointing, it was an insult to The Undertaker's intelligence and professionalism, because when he was shown the clear video proof that his head never touched the chair or the mat, Hogan didn't apologize or admit that he had exaggerated. Instead, he doubled down with an excuse so weak it was almost laughable, claiming that The Undertaker had simply held him too tightly during the move, and that this alone had somehow caused a neck injury, even though there was no real impact at all. The Undertaker's reaction to this excuse was instant and absolute.
It was too tight. And at that point, then I was like, okay. Then I knew, I was like, okay. I kind of realized, okay, I know what you're all about. And that's all I'm.
In that moment, The Undertaker finally saw through the facade that had fooled millions of wrestling fans for years, realizing that Hulk Hogan was fundamentally dishonest and willing to sacrifice anyone to protect his own image. This was not about a real injury or even a small misunderstanding. It was about a man who would rather damage a young wrestler's confidence and reputation than admit he had made up a story to excuse his loss. And that revelation completely changed the way The Undertaker would deal with Hogan from that day forward.
I treated him with the respect that I think that for what he did for the business, he deserved. So I treated him that way. I was not overly friendly, but I did, if he was in the building, I always made sure to say hello and engage him in conversation.
This professional courtesy was not born out of forgiveness or personal respect for Hogan. It came from The Undertaker's recognition of what Hogan had contributed to the wrestling business as a whole. But on a personal level, the relationship was permanently damaged, and The Undertaker made it clear that he would always keep his guard up around Hogan. that was not the only reason he saw Hogan's death as karma, because some of Hogan's past betrayals against others also played a role. One of the most striking examples came in 1986, when Jesse Ventura's hatred for Hogan grew out of an even deeper betrayal, as Ventura had tried to form a wrestlers' union before WrestleMania 2. To secure health insurance and retirement benefits for performers who were labeled as independent contractors. But Hogan, despite making far more money than most of his peers, went to Vince McMahon and exposed Ventura's efforts, allowing McMahon to threaten firings and ultimately shut down the union movement. This betrayal carried consequences far beyond personal grudges, because by shutting down the union effort, Hogan helped create systemic problems in wrestling that would haunt performers for decades. Wrestlers were left working without health insurance, retirement benefits, or the basic protections that unionized workers in other industries already had, and the result was years of suffering as many dealt with injuries, addiction, or financial struggles without a safety net, while countless others died young because they could not afford proper medical care. Ventura only discovered Hogan's betrayal during a 1991 lawsuit against Vince McMahon, and Hogan himself later admitted to his role in a 2024 documentary series. When Ventura was asked if he would ever make peace with Hogan, his answer was firm and final: never. This was not just personal hatred, it was about a deep betrayal of the entire wrestling community and their collective well-being. Bret Hart's issues with Hogan were just as damaging to his career, and one of the clearest examples came at WrestleMania 9 in 1993 when Hart, who was the WWE champion, was booked to lose the title to Yokozuna in the main event. In a last-minute change pushed by Hogan, he convinced Vince McMahon to let him face Yokozuna immediately after Hart's match, and in just 22 seconds, Hogan won the championship in an impromptu bout. Hart agreed to this only because he was promised that Hogan would later return the favor and put him over in another match. But Hogan refused, dismissing Hart's smaller size and tag team background as reasons he wasn't marketable enough. This betrayal robbed Hart of what could have been a defining moment as champion, and showed how Hogan was willing to use his political influence to lift himself up while holding others down. Hart has openly called Hogan a phony and criticized his limited in-ring ability, and his refusal to shake Hogan's hand during the 2005 WWE Hall of Fame ceremony was just one public glimpse of a much deeper animosity between them. But Hogan's pattern of backstage manipulation was not limited to just a few high-profile incidents, because in 2000 he feuded with cruiserweight Billy Kidman in WCW in what was supposed to be a storyline meant to elevate Kidman's status. Yet instead of building his credibility, Hogan tore it down by mocking him in radio interviews, saying he couldn't draw flies at a flea market. This public burial not only embarrassed Kidman, but also ruined any chance the feud had of being successful. Even Shawn Michaels, one of the most polarizing figures in wrestling, clashed with Hogan over his behavior, as during their 2005 SummerSlam program, they had agreed on a series of matches where each would get a win. But when it was time for the return match that Michaels was scheduled to win, Hogan used his influence to make sure he stayed on top and pulled out of the deal. Angered by this betrayal, Michaels responded by overselling Hogan's moves throughout their match, turning it into a near-comedy routine meant to mock the Hulkster. Perhaps the most revealing part of Hogan's character, however, was not only his constant betrayals of fellow wrestlers, but his total refusal to admit fault or take responsibility for his actions. When questioned about his behavior, Hogan almost always deflected, made excuses, or flat out denied the truth, even when evidence was right in front of him, and this pattern of dishonesty stretched far beyond wrestling politics into nearly every part of his public image. Hogan has a long record of telling exaggerated stories and outright lies, such as claiming he was asked to join Metallica as their bass player, a story the band members have openly denied, or insisting that he was offered the lead role in The Wrestler, a claim that has also been proven false. He even went as far as saying that Elvis Presley was a fan of his wrestling, despite the fact that Presley had already passed away not long after Hogan's career began. While these fabrications might look harmless on the surface, they reveal something much deeper about Hogan's relationship with the truth. Because when someone is willing to lie about small and easily proven details, it raises serious doubts about their honesty in far more important matters. If Hogan was willing to invent stories about meeting rock stars or being offered movie roles, why wouldn't he also lie about an injury to protect his wrestling career? This pattern of dishonesty became even more serious when it crossed into legal and ethical territory, most notably during the WWF Steroid trial in the 1990s. At first, Hogan denied ever using performance-enhancing drugs, sticking to his public image of vitamins and clean living to protect his family-friendly persona. But when the threat of perjury charges became real, he admitted under oath that he had used steroids from 1976 to 1989, directly contradicting years of public denials. This was not just about his personal drug use, it was about the hypocrisy of a man who preached clean living in public while secretly doing the opposite, and then lying about it in court. For many of his peers, this level of dishonesty was disgusting and made it impossible to trust someone who would put on such a false image while betraying everyone around him. But the most damaging revelation about Hogan's character came in 2015 when audio from a 2007 sex tape surfaced, capturing him making racist remarks while talking about his daughter Brooke's relationship with a black man. In the recording, Hogan was heard saying he would rather see her with an 8-foot-tall athlete worth millions of dollars than with her actual partner, before adding, "I guess we're all a little racist." He even went so far as to admit, "I am a racist to a point."
Out of everything that I've been through, this one hit me probably the hardest, and that's a heck of a thing to say, because I've been through a lot of crazy stuff.
The exposure of these racist comments led WWE to terminate Hogan's contract and even remove him from the Hall of Fame. But for many wrestlers, especially black performers, this was not shocking news. It was simply confirmation of suspicions they had held for years. Mark Henry admitted that the remarks personally hurt him because of wrestling's long history with racial stereotypes, and many black wrestlers together demanded that Hogan show real accountability for his actions.
I was to the point where I wanted to kill myself. I sat in my bathroom by myself when my ex-wife was gone and the kids were gone, and I was completely broken and destroyed.
Even after Hogan was reinstated into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2018, many wrestlers and fans remained doubtful of his apologies because the pattern was too familiar. Whenever he was caught doing wrong, Hogan would issue public statements that felt more like attempts to protect his image than signs of true remorse. His open support for conservative political figures, including his vocal backing of Donald Trump, only strengthened the belief among critics that his racial views had not truly changed. For The Undertaker, watching these revelations about Hogan's character pile up over the years must have felt like a slow-motion confirmation of everything he had suspected since 1991. The man who had lied to his face about a fake injury was the same man who had betrayed Jesse Ventura's union efforts, sabotaged the careers of other wrestlers, lied under oath about steroid use, and revealed racist attitudes while still presenting himself as an all-American hero. And in the end, it seemed like karma had finally caught up with Hulk Hogan. By January 6th, 2025, the wrestling world looked completely different from that November night in 1991 when a young Undertaker first discovered the truth about Hulk Hogan's character. The industry had become more transparent. Fans had greater access to behind-the-scenes realities, and the carefully built facades that once protected wrestling's biggest stars were collapsing under the constant scrutiny of social media. Nowhere was this change clearer than when Hulk Hogan walked out for his final WWE appearance at Monday Night Raw's Netflix debut, and was greeted not with cheers, but with a chorus of boos that would have been unimaginable during the peak of Hulkamania. For The Undertaker, watching from backstage as his longtime rival was rejected by the very fans who once idolized him, this was not a moment for pity, it was vindication. After more than 30 years of keeping his feelings about Hogan mostly private, the dead man's reaction was as cold and final as any tombstone piledriver he had ever delivered.
That pop was something.
It was something.
It was a pop.
It was. That was an ego pop.
Lord have mercy. Wonder what you think he went back to the dress. Well, you were there.
I was there.
What happened? What happened backstage after he came back?
No, when I saw him, he was no selling it and pushing his beer. I didn't see him. I wasn't backstage when he came.
The term ego pop was especially cutting. A wrestling industry phrase used to describe when someone gets a reaction not out of true fan appreciation, but purely from their own self-importance.
Did you feel bad for him? No.
Hey man, I got feelings. I got feelings for people. Like, sometimes in life, things come back.
Those 5 words, sometimes in life, things come back, captured 3 decades of bottled up frustration, professional betrayal, and moral judgment. The Undertaker was not celebrating Hogan's humiliation out of simple spite. He was acknowledging that wrestling, like life itself, has a way of delivering justice to those who spend years deceiving others. To understand why this moment felt like pure poetic justice to The Undertaker and so many others in the wrestling world, we have to look at how completely Hogan's life had unraveled by 2025. The man who had once been wrestling's golden child had by now become a symbol of controversy. Family turmoil and public rejection, much of it stemming from the same flaws The Undertaker had recognized more than 30 years earlier. Hogan's family life turned into a public disaster that clearly reflected the consequences of his selfish and manipulative behavior, most notably his bitter 2009 divorce from Linda Hogan, which was fueled by allegations of his affair with Christiane Plant, a close friend of his daughter Brooke. The affair was later confirmed by Plant in a 2008 National Enquirer interview, making it not only a betrayal of his wife, but also of his daughter's trust. The same selfishness that had defined Hogan's dealings in the wrestling business was just as evident in his personal life.
My family is in the worst mess. Brooke doesn't talk to us. She's had twins. She got married. She didn't tell us. She had twins. She didn't tell us. She had a huge fight with Terry. I don't know how that reflected onto me, but she cut me out too. I haven't talked to her for 7 years, almost 8 years now.
By March 2025, Hogan's daughter Brooke had not spoken to him for nearly 8 years. A heartbreaking situation that became even more tragic once the reasons were revealed. That month, Brooke publicly stated that she had cut off all contact with both of her parents because of extreme verbal and mental abuse dating back to her childhood. The estrangement was so complete that when she married Stephen Alexei and gave birth to twins in January 2025, Hogan showed no interest in meeting his own grandchildren. When he died on July 24, 2025, Brooke chose not to attend his funeral, instead paying her respects privately at a beach, later explaining publicly that Hogan had hated the morbidity of funerals and had never wanted one. Though the deeper message was clear, their relationship remained broken even in death. His son Nick also brought scandal and shame to the family, most infamously in 2007 at the age of 17 when he caused a high-speed car crash that left his friend John Graziano permanently brain damaged and in need of lifelong care, a tragedy that resulted in a civil lawsuit from Graziano's family and Nick serving 166 days in jail. As recently as November 2023, Nick was arrested once again for driving under the influence, showing that he had learned little from the earlier tragedy. And the dysfunction within Hogan's family was no accident. It was the predictable outcome of the same selfishness and dishonesty that had long defined his professional life. When someone builds their existence on lies and manipulation, when they place their image above the well-being of others, and when they are willing to betray anyone just to protect themselves, the fallout inevitably spreads into every corner of their life. Even after his reinstatement in 2018, many wrestlers and fans continued to doubt Hogan's apologies, because the pattern had become obvious. Whenever he was caught doing wrong, his public statements seemed aimed more at saving his reputation than showing true remorse. His later political choices, including his loud support of Donald Trump, only convinced many critics that his racial attitudes had never really changed.
I've had 17 surgeries in the last 10 years.
Oh my God.
Hogan's political shift in his final years marked the peak of his transformation from a beloved hero into a polarizing figure. At the 2024 Republican National Convention, he ripped off his shirt to reveal a Trump-Vance tank top and shouted, "Let Trumpomania run wild, brother," a moment that drew mixed reactions. His inflammatory remarks about then Vice President Kamala Harris, even asking if the crowd wanted him to body slam her, further distanced fans who remembered when Hulkamania had once stood for unity rather than division. By the time of his final WWE appearance in January 2025, the change was complete, as the man once cheered by millions was now booed while promoting his so-called real American beer, Hogan's own explanation for the crowd's negative reaction that fans were simply rejecting his political beliefs only proved that he still failed to see the truth, because the real issue was not his politics, but his character. The rise of podcasts, shoot interviews, and social media had finally pulled back the curtain on stories that wrestlers like The Undertaker had kept quiet for decades, and fans now knew about Hogan's betrayal of Jesse Ventura's union effort, his manipulation of younger wrestlers, his endless lies and exaggerations, and his constant choice to put his own success above the well-being of his colleagues. When Hogan died on July 24, 2025, exactly 10 years after his WWE termination, the timing felt almost poetic. He passed away from cardiac arrest at his home in Clearwater, Florida, following complications from neck surgery while also battling chronic lymphocytic leukemia.
What's not original here?
The knees are fake, the hips are fake, the back's full of metal, and part of my face is full of metal. I didn't get the memo about the fake wrestling.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, I missed it.
The circumstances of Hogan's death, his body weakened by decades of wrestling injuries and the toll of a punishing lifestyle, served as a stark reminder that even the most powerful personas are still mortal in the end.